guess a little bit of bonus material. It's kind of dark outside. I'm not sure if GoPro is going to really show anything, but here is a on ramp. Well, not this one. This is just a junction, but it's coming up in a minute or 30 seconds, 15 seconds or so. And I guess we will let this engine stretch its legs. Well, there is a car in front of me taking the same ramp. That's not good. We don't want to be stuck behind him. I guess we'll give him a little bit of a space, whatever that is, an SUV. Second gear. Oh, he's too slow. That's what an N52 sounds like. Unfortunately, we had this stupid SUV in front of us. So I guess there's going to be an exit. I'm going to take that exit, and I guess we can I can do a bit more of shifting, I guess. The downside driving with a high numerical rear end final gear ratio, I guess, is that the engine is spinning quite high RPMs wise when you're on the interstate going like 70 miles an hour. It's a little bit more than I kind of would want it to be, but to be fair, I can reference, so my experience, I guess I can share a little bit of that, what I can compare cars to. I can compare this car to my younger days when I had a 1996 E36 M3 US version, of course. It was a two-door Dakar yellow, 5-speed manual, of course. So 96 model in the United States had a 5-speed manual transmission, and as far as I know, E36 M3 has never had a 6-speed manual in the United States. So any 6-speed E36 M3s are either a conversion or a European version of the M3. If I'm not mistaken, I've never had any European model of a BMW. Well, that's not true actually. This exit we can do. What gear should we be in? Is that a good way? Yeah, well, my sound recording device has been flying around. In any case, what I was saying was that back in the day I had an E36 M3 5-speed manual, and so that car had about the same gear ratio, I guess, as this one has now. So naturally you are in a 5th gear on the interstate, and the engine at 70 miles an hour, the engine, if I'm not mistaken, I'm forgetting things now, I think it was past 3,000 RPMs. So that car desperately needed a 6th gear, and I guess that was the reason for the conversions. And the European version, I think it did have a 6-speed at some point, like in the end. This car picks up speed really nicely. That E36, you could not hit 62 miles per hour in the 2nd gear. So all the 0 to 60 times, I think, well, that particular model was rated to do 0 to 60 in about 5.6 seconds, and you had to do 2 shifts before you hit the 60 or 62 miles an hour. It would get into the rev limiter at about 56 or 58 miles an hour. The E36 M3 was a really well balanced chassis. Even in the stock US version, it was a really nice handling car, and I guess I kind of use it as a benchmark for everything else because of a ton of reasons. That car had many things engineered properly. Everything, I should not be saying everything, but a lot of things had been done properly on that car by the engineers. Yes, the lack of 6th gear was one of the negatives, I guess. A few other things that I could mention. For example, the steering wheel on that car was not adjustable like on these. People are used to the steering wheel going up and down, pulling in and out, forward, backward. You can adjust it for whatever you want it, you wish it to be. But on that E36, I was a particularly funny steering wheel positioning. It was not adjustable, and it was also not really, I should say, parallel to the center line of the car. That steering wheel had a bit of an angle to the left, I guess. You should not be forgetting that the center console or the dash panel was done in the style of a fighter jet. That's what everyone called it. It was kind of turning around towards the driver, and I think that's one of the things that really worth mentioning, or a subject that needs to be brought up when people talk about BMWs. Actually, 2 things that I can share. Not many people actually, especially those younger people that talk about BMWs these days, they don't those that don't have the experience of the original BMWs, those BMWs that were real BMWs, not, yes, I'm going to say it, not the newest BMWs that feel. Let's start with the F30. I have a short experience, luckily, a short experience of driving that car, F30 328i. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the F30 is one of those 3 Series BMWs that I don't want to own. It may sound controversial, but that's the 3 Series that I don't want to have. I don't want to own that BMW, that 3 Series. So the dash panel and the gauge cluster, the E36 M3, I think that was the best design of the dash and the gauge cluster ever. I had everything that it needed. Well, I would still want to see voltages and oil temperatures, but it did have the coolant gauge, and the design of it was just so perfect. I loved it so much, and I was, like I said, it was the best design of the dash panel ever. Like, everything was just the way it should have been done. Compared to the E46, the next generation 3 Series, 325, 330, I cannot say that I like that gauge cluster or the dash design. I just don't. I think it's not really, it's not terrible. It's not hateful. Again, it's not as hateful as F30. It is kind of nice on E46, but in my opinion, it's not as good as on E36. E36 is, you really felt in that car driving it, as you really felt the car was designed for the driver, just for one person behind the steering wheel. That's the car. The other thing that I kind of wanted to bring up, I've heard people say, the younger people driving the newest BMWs, someone was trying to explain why the BMW, what the magic of BMW is, like why they drive so well, the way they drive. And so that person was describing it as well, it's driving the way it is because it's a heavy car, but it still turns, accelerates, decelerates as if it did have all that fat on it, and that's not true. I totally disagree with that, because it drives the way it drives because of the suspension geometry, of the tuning of the suspension, not because it's heavy. So all of that suspension tuning and geometry and the design that the engineers put into it, it tries to hide how heavy the car is. Because I can compare again the E36 M3 to let's say a Nissan Maxima that was advertised as a 4-door sports sedan or a saloon, or so the E36 M3 in 2-door version was rated at 3,150 pounds, and the Nissan Maxima of that generation, which was the 4th generation of Nissan Maxima, was also it was exactly, well, the BMW was may have been 3,000, well, depending, I guess. Let's talk about the manual. 3,175 pounds, and the Nissan Maxima was at, it was 3,150 pounds. So those cars of the same year, or same, I guess they were the same. And those cars, I own both of them, were so far apart in the suspension department that you couldn't just, yes, of course, the BMW was a rear wheel drive, and the Nissan Maxima was the front wheel drive, although it was advertised as a sports sedan. Yeah, my battery is low. So it's not about the weight, it's about the suspension geometry, about engineering, about suspension tuning. So BMW engineers know how to build all those things properly.